Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 109 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are here after a week off to discuss the Nebraska games against Oklahoma and Michigan State. We're going to do another podcast here coming up that will talk about all the national big games and the implications of everything there on our next episode. But for this one, we're just going to focus straight in on our favorite Husker football team and what's been happening the past 2 weeks. I was traveling here recently, which is why we missed the previous podcast. And Dad, you actually just got back from a trip to Michigan for this most recent Michigan State-Nebraska game.
Yes, actually, we were still in Michigan, for our summer foray back home in Traverse City, and then as part of our departure from the state, heading back to the motherland of Lincoln, we set up the timing so that we would hit the Michigan State game on the way, and had a great weekend. Actually, your sisters, my daughters, were both joined us there in Lansing and East Lansing, I guess, and we were because we were within the state of Michigan, had a number of friends there, were invited to multiple tailgates. We just had a really good time taking in East Lansing, which was a lot of fun. And I think my wife kind of figured it was probably about a 65-70% nice Michigan State fans. Lots of welcome to East Lansing, thanks for being here kind of stuff, and cordial offers of beverages and the like. But then about 30% or so of derogatory types of statements as well.
Okay. Well, every stadium kind of has its own balance of those kinds of fans.
Exactly right. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But the weather turned out great. The forecast was going to be not so great, but it turned out to be a fabulous day for football.
Nice. Great. Well, for those of you who may be listening to us for the first time, we are a father-son duo here talking college football by college football fans for college football fans. And before we dive into our discussion of the Oklahoma game, I've got the beverage here to crack, as is our tradition.
Yes.
And I just bought these the other day, my Sapporo Japanese beer again.
Yes. Man, you're getting into that Japanese beer.
Yeah. I liked it when I had it in Tokyo. What can I say?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Is it expensive there because it's imported? Like compared to, say, a Corona, which would also be a foreign beer.
Right. Maybe slightly more, but not much.
Not much. Okay.
Not much to make a difference.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so for this Oklahoma game, I was traveling to a friend's wedding, and I was able to catch most of this game from my hotel room as I was getting dressed up because I was on the wedding day, of course. My buddy doing a wedding on a football Saturday, something you shouldn't do, but what can you do?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I caught most of the game live. I was texting with you a bit, but I missed the fourth quarter and caught up on that after the fact. And on our previous podcast, we gave our usual predictions for how we thought the game would go. And we were both kind of pessimistic. I predicted that Oklahoma would win 42-21, and you predicted 55-17 in terms of the scores. So I was kind of thinking, there would be quite a bit of scoring going on in the game, that we would kind of hang in there in the first half and then kind of fall out of it in the second half. But the score ended up being a lot closer than that, 23-16. Oklahoma beat us in a game where they made a fair amount of mistakes. And if we, were a clean football team, that kind of had our fundamentals together, I think we could have capitalized on those mistakes and been able to pull out a surprise upset. But of course, this is Scott Frost's Nebraska team we're talking about. So while there were flashes of brilliance in there were also lots of false starts, stupid mistakes, special teams mistakes that cost us points, and we end up losing the game, a game that we could have won, but we made it competitive with an Oklahoma team that we were expecting to blow us out. So you have to at least consider that a moral victory in some sense.
Yeah, that was it was the thing that came out of that game for me was an awareness that okay, our defense is at least good here, okay? Because in the previous three games, we had shown that we had the potential to be good in the previous games, but they were against competition that frankly was not gonna scare anybody from an offense standpoint, or at least that was my perception. And so Oklahoma was our first real test where I could confidently say Oklahoma is a team that, from an offense standpoint, is going to put up some points and has some tremendous talent. Had a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback who has been has lit it up in some of his previous years and was a mature like third or fourth year starter. So you would have expected Oklahoma to be clicking on all cylinders by this point. And so I was very concerned. They had scored what was it, 69-0 the week before. So this is an offense that was definitely clicking than the previous week. Um, so
It was actually 76-0.
Okay, 76-0. There you go. So, but so this was at the end of it, you're looking at it and you're again frustrated that you do a little quick review here, and we could have been right in this thing, but we again do the stupid things at the most inopportune times to basically snatch, victory from the jaws of defeat. Or I should, or do I have to say that in the reverse of that? Snatch, yeah, yeah,
Snatch
exactly.
defeat from the jaws of victory.
Jaws of victory, yes. That's what our MO is, and
yeah, that's up on the locker room.
Yeah, exactly right. Instead of play like a champion, like Notre Dame says, well, that's what we say. But Jesus, it was just frustrating. But there were reasons because most Nebraska fans expected Oklahoma to be a loss. I think there were reasons coming out of that game that, as a Nebraska fan base, you could look at it and say, okay, that just might be a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep up the good work, kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And see what happens, see what transpires.
Yep. And when you look at the stats, they were all close. We had 18 first downs. They had 21. We had 384 total yards. They had 408. We had 8 penalties, but they had 7. So both teams were making some stupid mistakes. Time of possession was pretty much equal. We
Turnovers.
Right. Well, we had 1 interception and they didn't. So that was one area where we were definitely worse than them. We weren't able to capitalize on a turnover opportunity. On third downs, we were 6 of 14, and they were 6 of 11. So kind of a defensive battle. Both offenses were struggling. I forget the stat, but it was the first time Oklahoma had been held to 23 points or less of offense in a long time. So,
right. I know.
I know we've given Shenander, our defensive coordinator, some crap in the past, but it feels like this year he, with the senior talent that's come back from last year because of the COVID rules, he's really managed to build together a team that's got something going, some nice cohesion there on that defensive side of the ball.
I would agree, and I think he began to show it. This was the game where he showed that a little bit, right? That the team showed that. Mm-hmm. They are a legitimate defense,
right?
I wouldn't call them great or anything, but they're pretty solid.
No. One other stat, though, that was lopsided in their favor is that they had 5 sacks and we had 0. Because once again, the offensive line, which we had mentioned on the previous podcast as a worry spot after our game against Buffalo, and it certainly turned out to be that way. We had 95 yards of rushing, so we actually got most of our work done on the passing game throughout that game. But that was another game where Adrian played pretty well. He was 19 of 25 in terms of completions. The 1 interception obviously is bad. But, there have been a lot of situations this year where he's been getting pressured because his offensive line can't protect him. And he's found ways to, scamper out to get some positive yards, or in some cases, make it a big play.
Big, right. Exactly. Which he did in that game. So,
yep. Yep.
Yeah. And that's the problem is that so much of our offense, including the Oklahoma game, was centered almost exclusively on Adrian, right? Either he was the guy that was breaking a scramble and running for 50 or 60 yards to flip a field and put us in a position to score, or, he was scrambling to buy some time and then making a throw that led to a big gain. You know what I mean? It's not like we've had that many examples, although there was, I believe, one drive in that game that I would call a legitimate, nice combination of run and pass plays, marching it down the field, first down kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got one of those that I was pleased with in the Oklahoma game.
But if I recall, because I remember watching that was a nice drive and we felt like we had some momentum, and that's the one where on the PAT it gets blocked. Right. The guy scoops it up and runs it back to the other side for 2 points. So the momentum we had immediately just goes down the tube.
Exactly right. And frankly, that was a huge difference in the game, not just because of the 3-point differential that represents, -1 for us and +2 for them, but it was also the incredible emotional. I mean, you finally had broken through and scored, right? Because we've really struggled to score in the red zone this year. Again, that can be traced in large degree to an offensive line that's not getting a push, not getting it done, right? So,
right,
not surprising.
Yeah, yeah,
but Jesus.
But once again, that was a game where, compared to, those predictions we had of us getting blown out, 50-17 or whatever,
right,
we were much more competitive. And so, and I remember looking at my phone and thinking, oh gosh, this game is like over. And then we got a touchdown there in the fourth quarter. We were able to kind of pin them deep. I remember they made a special teams mistake where like their guy grabbed a ball that was kind of going out of bounds when he shouldn't have, and that gave them kind of bad field position.
And our defense held.
Yep. In those short yard situations. So there definitely were positives to go out of that game. The fact that we played better than we thought. I remember the commentators were being quite complimentive of Adrian Martinez, saying, "Oh, this is one of the best games I've seen him play in a long time," et cetera, et cetera. And then going into this Michigan State game, because Michigan State, just in that same week we played Oklahoma, they played against Miami, a ranked Miami team, and they beat them pretty soundly. I think it was like 38-17 or something along those lines. So if we had done a podcast last week, I probably would have predicted that we would have played them close but lost, because it seemed like they had that momentum and they had some real offensive weapons on their side. And then we get to watching the actual game, and our defense kind of struggled early, letting some big pass plays go through, but managing to, kind of stiffen up in the red zone, force them to kick some field goals, things like that. And then the offense, unfortunately, just like at the beginning of the Oklahoma game, having multiple false starts that just completely sets back the drive. And Adrian getting hurt, having to go out for a series before coming back into the game. So, a lot of things were kind of going bad, and I was kind of thinking, oh man, this could be one where it spirals fast. But we managed to hang in there. And then in the second half, the defense really buckles down, really has a grasp of what Oklahoma's trying to do, along with their quarterback.
You mean Michigan State?
I'm sorry, yes, Michigan State. Really getting a grasp on what Michigan State's trying to do, as well as their quarterback missing some guys. There were definitely open receivers that he just flat out missed the pass. But that led to Michigan State having 0 first downs in the entire second half, and us being up by 7 with like 4 minutes left to go in the game, until we make another special teams mistake that completely flips the momentum of the game yet again, and we end up choking it in overtime, because that's what we do. And you were there live in person to experience those emotions. So how did that feel for you?
It was awful. It was god awful. But you're right. You felt good, especially as that second half was unfolding, I mean, our defense was playing well. Our offense was moving the football. It seemed like our offensive line was starting to get legs under itself. All of a sudden we were getting some pretty regularly some 4, 5, 6 yard runs out of our running backs, and we were making some good pass plays. And it just seemed like every time we got the ball, it wasn't a 3 and out. It was getting some first downs and moving the football. And so there were some opportunities for us to score. Other than when we did score, there were certainly drives that could have led to scores, but each time, like you said, an untimely penalty. We had some questionable, um, you know, uh, mistakes in terms of uh, illegal procedure, lining up wrong, just, I mean, stupid stuff. And of course, at just a horrible moment, you just got 2 first downs in a row, and then boom, you're wanting to get up there and try to do your fast paced offense, and then you have an illegal motion on 1st and 10, right? So now you're 1st and 15, okay, and then they try to run the football and they stuff you, and now you're 2nd and 15, you're way behind the sticks, and the threat dies, right? So it's just making those little mistakes that they seem little, but they're not little. See, and that's where you talk about being a detailed team, a team that understands the discipline required to win football games, and so we've had the talent to match, physically and speed wise with Oklahoma. It's not like Oklahoma, back to that game. It's not like they ran by us or anything, right? So I mean, they had some individual players that had incredible talent, but we were able to hang with them, and it wasn't a huge disparity. So our talent level on this team does not is not greatly separated by even some pretty talented teams. And against Michigan State, frankly, I think our speed was superior. I felt like maybe Michigan State was just a little bit of a step, not a full step, but a part of a step slower. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have a lot of real speed. They had one guy with great speed who, of course, ended up running a punt back against us and winning the game, but or at least tying it at the time. But their great running back, who was getting some early season Heisman talk, we shut him down, and their quarterback, who had played quite efficiently, really struggled against us, and we got to him. Speaking of not having any pressure against Oklahoma, we got to him in the Michigan State game a few times, and we were definitely almost there a lot. Meaning he was having to get rid of that ball because somebody was breathing down their neck at him.
Yep.
So there were some hurries in that. I don't know what the total numbers were, but our defensive performance in this game was the first time I felt like I was watching what I would consider black shirt type defense in quite a number of years. Okay. Yeah, I mean, our secondary was really in pretty darn good shape. And then, of course, he helped us with a few bad passes when there was a guy open,
Right.
which could have hurt us, but didn't.
Yep, and so you're right. We got 3 sacks on him over the course of the game, and I remember I talked to you after the game about there were a couple of times I remember where one of our guys was getting blocked by the offensive line, and they did that move where they kind of managed to get off of that block at the last second and kind of dive over to get the runner's legs, to bring him down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There were
right. So there was no gain or very small gain or whatever.
Right. I saw, or like when, they're throwing one of those routes, to the edge of the field, on with like 3 yards to go, and one of our guys manages to run out there and stop them, on to
Just
4th
short.
and 1, right?
Yep.
That those kind of like plays that require that extra little bit of effort to like, get them done quick. We were doing that a lot, which, like you say, it's something we haven't seen from our guys in a while. And so it was great to see it consistently there in that second half.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
Reimer and Nelson both had great games again.
Yep.
I picked up on that. And 2 quick questions I thought I should ask you. One, going into the game, were you predicting that we were going to win or lose? And 2, since you were there in the stadium, it certainly seemed like from watching on TV that the crowd was getting pretty darn loud, which contributed to some of those false starts. Would you say that was the case?
Oh yeah, again, the coach from Michigan State is really quite good, I think, Tucker, because he understood what he needed to do. He had to be concerned about his team maybe being a little complacent, coming off the heels of a great, maybe you might even say unexpected victory against Miami, right? And so he needed to keep his team lathered and really fired up. Well, how do you do that? You do everything you can to lather up the fans and make sure you pull out all the stops for the home game, right? To create the best home environment you can. And they did. If you saw the game from TV, you saw it was a stripe out game, right?
Yep.
They had white and green stripes throughout the stadium, and and the student section was expansive. I mean, that was a huge student turnout. I suspect that other than maybe the Michigan game in East Lansing, I don't know if it's in East Lansing this year, but it would take that kind of an opponent to get that kind of a full student section again this season from them. That would be my guess. I mean, they really showed up, and it was loud, no doubt.
Yep.
So good football, college football environment definitely had an influence on our players and some of the false starts. I'm almost certain that that's true. But again, shouldn't be happening to us. Not like we're not used to Big Ten stadiums at this point, right? So
Right.
being loud and all that shouldn't have been an issue.
And
But
what was your feelings going into the game on win or
oh,
loss?
I would have predicted Nebraska to lose in a close game because, again, going into the game, I had, watched or rewatched the Michigan State Miami game and a little bit of who was the other team they played? Oh, Northwestern. And I watched that game, and I just felt like they were executing and a lot more crisp than we had been, right? But that I was hopeful that our defense would be able to make it close, meaning they hang around type of thing. So, frankly, the way the score ended up being was about how I thought the score would be, right? So, I would have been pretty close on the score, and I would have predicted a victory by Michigan State, but I would not have expected or predicted our defense to play as well as it did, and frankly, for our offense to be as dominant, really, in the second half as it was, in terms of being really controlling the game, and then the defense just shutting them down. If someone had told me before the game that your defense was going to shut Michigan State out and shut them completely down in the second half and not give them any positive yardage, and that your offense was going to move the football the way it did, I would have said, well, we won by 2 touchdowns or maybe more, right?
Right.
So it's one of those things that as it played out, everybody in the stadium, including the Michigan State fans that were around us, all turned and admitted we should have never won this game. Your team was better,
Right.
but you made enough mistakes that we were able to take advantage of it. And that's, this Tucker guy, he was the coach at Colorado for the last 2 games we played at Colorado. And what can we say about both of those experiences? Those are both Scott Frost games, both teams or games where, frankly, we were the better team than Colorado. We had more talent than Colorado. We had at times as much as 17-point lead against Colorado. And in each case, we lost those games to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. This is a coach who understands that all he has to do, he doesn't have to beat Scott. He has to let Scott beat himself, and hang around and just be in a position to take advantage of it. And he did.
Yep. And you were just making me think. And when it came to those penalties, we ended up having 6 for 40 yards. They had 5 for 44 yards. So that's one thing I think to note is that a lot of the penalties that we had were those kind of shorter penalties, like the false starts and illegal motions.
What are you saying? 6 for what?
40 yards.
That's how many penalty yards we had for the Michigan State game?
Yep. That's what
I don't believe that. I think that's a misprint.
Okay, maybe
it's got to be higher than that.
That's what it said.
But okay, all right. I would question that, but wow, if that's true, that is surprising.
Maybe
I
it's
will
50.
say this. I will say this. It seemed like there were more penalties called because there were 2 reviewed targeting penalties that ended up both being deemed not targeting. And so those are two major penalties, if you will, that ended up not happening, but they did happen in terms of causing delay in the game, getting the reaction from the crowd and lathering up the crowd, who were very angry on both occasions when they didn't choose to call it targeting. Even though I don't think either one was targeting, I thought the refs ultimately came to the right conclusion. But that just shows you another flaw in that whole system is it allows the a home team, for example, to really get lathered up as a result of that decision process and all that time, and it can deflate what just took place, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, I will say, the refs. My impression of them was that they were reviewing a lot of different things, but they were getting to the right result because like both times they went to targeting when they showed the replay, I was like, no, that's not targeting. It's like hitting with the shoulder. It's not the helmet to helmet contact. He's an active runner. There are different rules when it's active, and they got to the right result, which made me very happy. And I also just double checked ESPN, and they have the same stat down there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because, well, think about it. Most of them were those kind of 5-yard penalties. The one I can remember that it wasn't was, you may remember early on in the game, we were going to 3-and-out them, and our guy got to the quarterback and then basically suplexed the quarterback, MSU quarterback, like right in front of the ref. Which, and you could see in the replay what he was doing because he was trying to strip the ball, and he actually did. The ball did pop out. But, he was doing so much after the forward momentum had stopped, and the ref was literally right there. It was like one of those bonehead.
And it's a quarterback.
Right.
You just got to understand when it's a quarterback. Well, and that's just, and the quarterback was involved in one of the targeting penalties. And again, it was one of those things when you saw it, it was like, oh, he just hit him too hard. There's no targeting there. Anytime a quarterback gets hit or near the out of bounds sideline, they throw that flag or they review that so fast it's not funny. It's like that guy became a runner, 10 yards ago. Okay, he stopped being a quarterback back there, but yet they still do it. Right. They just want to protect those pretty boys so much. It just drives me freaking crazy.
Right. But my main point was going to be that we did clean up on the false starts and stuff,
in the second half.
Right, in the second half, we the offensive line got much more disciplined on that. And the fact that it was only for 40 yards, whereas in past games it's been much more than that, with these big 15-yard automatic first down type penalties. Right. I would consider it a small step that, it's these smaller things versus the really damaging ones.
No, you're right. And if you had told any coach you're going to have 40 yards of penalties at the end of the game, he would probably say, I'll take that.
Right. Not too bad because, like I said, Michigan had 5 penalties for 44 yards. And you may remember they threw an interception right on their first drive of the game. So, when they started the game, they got the ball and they immediately threw an interception. So they were kind of off on the back foot from the beginning from that perspective. And when you look at the stats, they're pretty dominant in our direction. 26 first downs versus 12, a total of 442 yards of offense versus 254. Time of possession, 38 minutes versus 22.
There was 231 yards of offense at halftime. So you said 254. Is that what?
254, yes.
254. So that's 23 yards that they made in the second half. And those 23 yards were from the 25 down to the 2 when they kicked the field goal in overtime.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say I think it was basically at 0 yards at the end of regulation.
Right, in terms of
the second half.
Their overall yard gain because we sacked them a couple times. And I know we held them to 0 first downs. Yeah, they were 1 of 10. They were 1 of 10 on third downs. And the one time they went for it on fourth down, they didn't make it. Conversely, that's amazing. It is amazing. Conversely, though, on our side, we were 7 of 20 on third downs, but we did make it twice on fourth down because we kind of went into that when we were beyond midfield. We basically were like, we're going for it on fourth down as long as it's reasonable.
Right.
And, because of, like you said, the fact that our offensive line was starting to kind of get into a groove with, pushing them back, and our, run was being successful, we were able to have the confidence that we could get those fourth and short situations. And I really thought that drive where we did bring it down the field, because it was a tie ball game, we brought it down, we scored, we went up 20-13 or whatever it
Right.
was.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And, and then we were in that position where it looked like we were going to win the game because there's only a few minutes left in the ball game. And we 3-and-out them. We get the ball back. And unfortunately, we kind of play a little conservative, aren't able to get it going.
First down. Yep.
And then we have our punter come out. I don't think this was the same guy that punted it for 7 yards that almost ended in a disaster at the end of the first half because we swapped punters. But turns out this guy's also bad because Scott said in his post-game press conference that he was supposed to kick it to the right. Instead, he kicked it to the left. So basically the complete opposite direction of where our players thought it was going to be. And as such, that left lane was completely wide open. And the guy ran it back for a touchdown that tied up the ball game with like 4 minutes to go. And from there, you kind of, the writing was on the wall. I knew like, oh, we've been so terrible in these situations in the past. In fact, some people gathered the stats on Twitter. So there have been 16 drives at the end of games where we had the chance to win or to tie the game out of the 37 games that Scott Frost has been here at Nebraska. And of those 16 drives, we have scored twice. We have won once out of 16 times. We've done 3 overtimes, and they've ended with no points, no first downs, 2 interceptions. We have scored no points in overtime since 2013. So that just goes to show that we are such a choky... Right. We're the opposite of clutch. We choke. When it gets into a tough situation near the end of games, we choke. That is the trend.
And it goes back to my reference of calling it being a China doll. We're mental midgets from emotional maturity and mental toughness standpoint, which is just drives me crazy because that's the complete opposite of what we were when Tom Osborne was our coach, and then Frank Solich was our coach. We may not have been as talented, but we were still mentally tough. And I feel like, then following that, and when we started getting into the coaching carousel thing, we lost that edge, and we've never gotten it back until I saw this defense this weekend, and I thought, well, you know what? Our defense has a chance to maybe start to reestablish that a little bit on the defensive side, and maybe that helps bleed over into the rest of the team. You got to start somewhere, right?
Right.
So I can be hopeful that that's maybe a true statement. Now, here's a couple of things. So now we're sitting here. We've talked about the 2 games, and there's a couple of bigger picture things that I would like to talk about if you're done with the specifics of the Michigan State game. You got anything else you want to add to our convo on Michigan State?
I guess just the one thing I wanted to say was that I think in an overall perspective, in the early, I think after that Illinois game, I was being pretty down on Adrian, being like, oh man, he looks the same as last year. He's making the same stupid mistakes, keeps overthrowing guys, yada, yada, yada. And some of that has still carried over in that, he had a bad fumble where he was held on the ball way too long during this game. And then he threw in an interception later in the game, although it may be that he was still kind of banged up from that injury he took earlier on. So you have to kind of weigh that into the consideration. And he
overthrew a lot of,
he overthrew some,
how do you overthrow a 6'8" tight end?
Yes. We brought that up in the past. So you overthrew some guys, and more importantly, there were guys that were open down the field, even in the in overtime. I remember, I think on that first play that we had a guy open in the end zone, and Adrian didn't see him. So that has all been very frustrating. But Adrian's, like we said earlier, his ability to scamper out of situations. There's a lot of plays where with a less athletic quarterback, they just would have been sacked, or situations that Adrian's been able to make something happen out of nothing, or where he's thrown great balls. Like I remember there were a couple in this MSU game where he was on the run, he threw a bullet, between two guys, and our guy caught it. It was like, wow, damn, or throwing to our tall tight ends, and making good
Right.
use of them in this game. So like I think I have seen improvement in Adrian compared to last season in a lot of areas, but it's just those few sticking points that keep kind of coming back up, you know. And some of
Well,
it, some
and
of that's the
again,
fact that he got sacked 7 times this game, and his offensive line was
exactly.
really struggling. But it's just like it's once again he feels like he's so close to being what we want him to be, but he's just not, can't quite make
Well,
that last step.
and you do have to recognize that, okay, in his first year as a freshman, which everybody often references, he's gotten worse rather than better. He probably had, well, we know he had 3 guys at least in front of him on the offensive line that are now playing in the NFL. Okay, back then, uh, and but then he's had 2 seasons where his offensive line hasn't been very good. Okay, so you got to recognize that even like now, I mean, one of the reasons he doesn't see those open receivers is because he's very quick to have to drop his eyes from the patterns, you know, and glance to see who's coming and going to kill him, right? Because he
Yep.
can't trust his offensive line. Well, guess what? You don't get to go through your progressions because you can't take, the second that it takes to bring your eyes down, assess the situation, and make sure everybody's holding their blocks, and then refocus on your receivers and go through your progressions again. You have to be able to go through your progressions with confidence, but then he also has to have the internal clock that says, okay, I only get 3 seconds back here. If I drop back, I should do my progressions for 3 seconds. And if an offensive lineman has blown their block that quickly, then in 3 seconds I get sacked. That's on that guy. It's not on me, right? And I can't even be expected to make that guy miss necessarily in 3 seconds. Now, after 3 seconds, I should be aware that someone might be close, right? So it's one of those deals where it just feels like he doesn't have the benefit of confidence that his offensive line can do the job. And if he did, then he'd be able to keep his eyes downfield and he'd find some of these guys. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something to that. And I also think there's something to the fact that, he has been able to kind of like hold on to the ball, scramble in these situations, and make plays
Yeah.
happen, either throwing it on the run to an open guy or running himself, and getting something going. So I think his instinct is to always kind of try that first, even in situations where, somebody else might recognize immediately, this is no good. I should just throw it away, move on to the next play. It's kind of that thing where, he feels like he needs to constantly make a play. Like I think there was one in the Michigan
Right.
State game where he was getting sacked and he threw as he was getting
Yes.
hit, and it got to the guy and we got some positive yards out of it. But that's a
Yep.
situation he's done in the past and it's gone terribly.
Right. Right. That's true.
So, but I think now is a good time, like you said, to focus on what's coming down the line, how the rest of the season is looking, and what
Yeah.
our team kind of needs to do from here with the situation of our 3 main sides of the ball: offense, defense, and special teams, where we are at this midpoint of the season.
Well, here's one thing that I just need to mention, and this is a negative thing, and then we'll talk about the 2 sides of the coin of the season and what's left. And this first thing is it's about special teams. Okay, everybody knows because it's become so public because Nebraska fans have raked Scott over the coals, and national pundits are now ripping him for this as well. Is his choice not to have a special teams coordinator, right?
Yeah.
He made that decision. Every staff has 10 official coaches that they can use, and they can assign those coaches to any roles they want, right? But they're limited to their 10. Well, we choose not to use one of those 10 spots for a special teams coach, okay? And yet now we find ourselves having lost 3 games because of special teams out of the 5 that we've played. 3. Okay. And if I'm preparing for Nebraska and I'm Northwestern, for example, which is our next opponent, and Northwestern is the perfect example because they have a great coach who is all about finding a way to win, not always having the best team, but finding a way to win. Guess what I would do? I would focus on special teams. Why? Because the other team isn't. Right? Where can I get an enormous advantage fairly easily? By introducing things they haven't seen on film, by changing up my punting scheme, by changing up my kick return, by having a good fake punt or fake field goal ready to go. Because in all likelihood, if it's not already been on film, Nebraska's team won't be ready for it.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So it's a slam dunk. If I take the time to prepare my team for some of these areas or these aspects of special teams, then in all likelihood, if I need to pull the trigger on any of these things, there's a greater chance that they'll succeed because I know Scott Frost is not devoting the time and energy, and his team has not, over the course of an entire offseason, prepared to be great in special teams. So I can take advantage of that and win the battle. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, you can't be that way. At Division I football, you can't be that way. And here's the deal: Scott Frost has a quarterbacks coach. He has an offensive coordinator, and he is a play caller / offensive coordinator himself. So he's devoting three coaches, two coaches and himself, okay, to the quarterback, and he won't have a special teams coach.
Right.
That, to me, is a misallocation of resources. We also have a tight ends coach. I mean, you've got to reallocate things so that you can have a position available for a special teams coordinator. And if that means you have to say goodbye to one of your longtime assistants, you got to do that. Okay. And Scott should have figured that out after last season. I mean, special teams should have been a priority in this offseason, and we should have had the problem fixed.
Right. Well,
then people couldn't bitch at him about it.
He said that it was a priority, and in the press conference, I think he mentioned that he, and I forget the coach's name, it was like Darrow or something along those lines, but he said Scott and him have been, coaching the special teams guys, the best that we know how to do, and they just got to go out there and execute, was basically what he said. But I was like, well, my result of that, hearing that, is that you guys don't know special teams that well. Maybe you should get an actual special teams coach to handle it.
And here's the thing: we have a great special teams coach, a guy who's demonstrated that as an analyst. But again, he cannot coach.
Yes.
Okay. Billy Bush is on our staff as an analyst, but he should be coaching.
Yes.
He should be our assistant coach.
Yep.
And that's a choice Scott has made, and he's having to live with that now, right?
Yep.
So as we approach the rest of this season, how do you adjust? How can you fix that, problem?
Well, frankly, and I know, as a coach, you probably don't want to be thinking about like the PR side of things, but from a PR perspective, I think it would calm quite a few people in Husker Nation down if he made that kind of bold decision to fire a coach midway through the season, promote that analyst guy to be the special teams coach, and I am not letting this continue. We're, fixing this now.
Right
even
now.
even if, there's a limited amount that guy can do, in the week between the next game and so on and so forth or whatever, it would show that he recognizes the problem and is willing to, kind of create some disruption in order to fix it.
Alex, you're right. And that would go a long way in having some Nebraska fans who right now are very critical of him to say, because he's not showing the kind of leadership that one would expect. They would at least look at that and say, well, maybe Scott's finally woken up and realizes that he needs to demand a level of performance. And when he's not seeing it, he's got to do something about it. He can't stand pat and wait a whole year and say, well, we'll get to it next year. That's not an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
And so, I would love to see that, frankly.
And especially,
I think our quarterbacks coach is an interesting guy. He's a personality, but nothing in our quarterback development in the 4 years that Scott's been here would lead me to believe that he's instrumental in our success or failure.
Yeah.
And I also know that we have an offensive coordinator and Scott Frost, who is a past quarterback and past offensive coordinator. So we got plenty of guys who can coach quarterbacks, even if it's Scott himself, right? So if you had to fire that guy, you fire his ass. And thank you very much for your service. Thanks for being a great mentor and friend or whatever. But I need to do this because I need a special teams coach, and this is my guy, and he happens to be right here in the next room. But he can't talk to players. He can't be out there on the practice field with us, walking through stuff and really doing what needs to be done.
Right. And I know we talked about this on an earlier podcast at the beginning of the year after the Illinois game. And you had said that you thought that, well, I guess this was before the Illinois game. You said that you thought that our new AD, Trev Alberts, wouldn't fire Scott this year no matter kind of what, because that's just not the guy he is. He wants to give Scott a chance, da-da-da-da. And I kind of said, no, I think Scott's job is on the line this year if we have another, 4-win type season. And I still think that's the case. So if
you do.
if Scott cares about this job, then he should be willing to make some big decisions because he has to realize he's on limited time at this point.
You know what? And I agree with you in that, I may have been, my perspective on making those statements was more about the type of person that Trev Albers is, our new AD, rather than what I thought about Scott's, success or failure. It was more about the fact that I feel like Trev is a guy that's going to want to give his coaches every opportunity to succeed. And, but I also know Trev is a disciplined guy, right? He's a focused, hardworking guy. And if he's beginning to see enough indications that Scott is maybe a little too nonchalant, a little not detailed enough, that sort of thing, he may have already be arriving at the conclusion that, what, Scott isn't going to make it here. He's not devoting himself to this job the way that the head coach at the University of Nebraska needs to be devoted. Yep. And so maybe I do need to make this change. My fear is if he does that, he has not yet had enough time as a Division I, athletic director to really build the networks necessary to go out and get the next great guy. Mm-hmm. So unless he already had somebody in mind and maybe even some channels in place that he could pull that trigger, I just feel like he would be inclined to give it a year, let the buyout diminish. That would happen in another year of time for Scott and his staff, and also give Scott that additional year of opportunity to turn this thing around. Because it isn't going to get easier next year. Frankly, if Scott does turn it around next year, that will be impressive because our schedule doesn't necessarily get a whole heck of a lot easier. Oklahoma's still in a non-conference, for example. And we're going to lose all that defense.
Right. So, yeah. Well, the one good part of our team. Well, it was wonderful.
Right.
I will say you may not have seen this because you were at the game, but after one of those first two series, when the offensive line just kept making all those false starts, they did show a shot of Scott on the sidelines screaming at him, like getting in their face, which I personally like to see because, what they were doing there was unacceptable and it's been a recurring issue. So that was something I was actually happy to see. But going back to that stat I gave earlier about like the 16 drives we've had with the chance to win the game, how many of our losses over the course of the time with Scott Frost have been 7 points or less and all that sort of stuff. Once again, you could make an easy argument that if we had decent special teams, not great, but decent special teams, we might have won, more games this year and be 5-0 instead of 2-3 like we are right now.
There's no doubt. I you know what? I would say that number is probably closer to 10 in the 4 years. This is Scott's fourth season. In the 4 years that Scott's been our coach up to this point, um, I would say there are 10 games that were lost because of poor special teams play that average special teams would have led to victories for us. 10 games out of the 21 or so, one score games that we've been in.
Right. But my counter to that would be that is the exact same. Well, maybe it wasn't so special teams focused, but that was basically the exact same refrain we were talking about during the Mike Riley era, and that we also were better than a lot of the teams we played, and we said, oh, like we're the best 5-win team in the country, because we were like really close in a lot of those games that we lost, but we still lost them, and we had that similar kind of vibe of the choke factor under Riley that we do under Scott. And early in Scott's career, the argument could have been made, oh, a lot of those he's stuck with a lot of Riley's players. There was, players, right. He was trying to fix the culture. There were players that weren't buying into Scott's whole thing, which is fair. Okay, whatever. But that was the early years. Now these are all Scott's guys. This is his fourth year as the coach. So he can't use that excuse anymore. But listen to that press conference that he gave afterwards. His basic thing was like, we're doing everything we can. We're teaching them the right things in practice. These guys just need to execute, and these parts of our teams, like the team needs to basically get on the special teams guys and say, what are you doing? Get it together, guys. Which on the one hand, I understand what he's saying because a lot of it does come down to player execution in these critical moments. But at the same time, I think he needs to own up to a bit of responsibility in that these are your guys now. Something's got to be wrong with somebody on your coaching staff for it to be this disastrous.
Exactly. And when you see the same kind of mistakes in terms of concentration, not knowing what to do, that tells me you're not having enough repetition. And again, gets back to I'm beating some dead horses here now, Alex, about not having enough live football, not playing at live football game speed, things of that nature, where then when our guys get into a real game, it seems a lot faster and harder for them. Whereas a good team would tell you practices were the hard part, games were the easy part. And I don't think any Nebraska player is going to be saying that right now because it sure doesn't look like the games are easy. Right?
No, it doesn't.
So that's a problem. But okay, with all of that said, because I know we need to wrap things up here a little bit, is now where do we go? We've had 5 games. We are now sitting at 2-3. The next 2 games are at home. This one this week is against Northwestern. Then we get Michigan at home, and then we go on the road, and it doesn't get easier. We play Ohio State. We play. We've still got to play Wisconsin and Purdue and
Iowa.
Iowa and Minnesota. Although Minnesota now, they lost this past weekend, and maybe, just maybe, we have a chance at that game. And Wisconsin, although they lost in a game that numbers wise or final score looks lopsided, Wisconsin was absolutely in that game against Notre Dame until the fourth quarter, and things kind of just unraveled on them in a bizarre kind of way where I think they had a couple of turnover, a pick and score or a scoop and score or something. Yeah. And then another one that was either that or damn close. And so 14 points of that disparity were basically, unique single play kind of events. Right. But overall, Wisconsin had hung with Notre Dame, through that whole thing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I saw that as well. I believe you're right. It was 2 pick sixes at the end. They just scored a whole bunch in the fourth quarter, and Wisconsin kind of melted.
So Wisconsin's the real deal for the most part, and their defense is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be great this weekend to see them play Michigan and see how that plays out. Right.
Yes.
We'll get a little insight from both of those teams.
What I wanted to say was that I think at this point, I guess the very best I think we can realistically hope for as Nebraska fans is that we get to a I guess it would
5
be,
wins.
yeah, it would be, well, I was going to say 6.
Well,
If
okay, give me those 4 wins.
Well, right. Well, once again, this is the realistic best case scenario.
Okay, give it to me.
Would be 6-6 at this point, which would be beating Northwestern, Minnesota, Purdue, and Iowa, losing to Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. Now, I think the more realistic
Yeah.
scenario is maybe we only win 1 or 2 of those games.
Yes, that is the far more likely outcome.
Yes.
And at least, I mean, I get it. I think Iowa is probably one of the most overrated teams in the country, but they are undefeated and they're a top 10 team. So putting them on that list is if you believe the pundits at all, is more of an outlandish list or list item than Michigan,
Mm,
right? Who is undefeated and ranked also, but hasn't necessarily looked all that impressive in some of their games, including the one they just played.
true.
Um,
True.
Rutgers ran out of time. They were playing some darn good football in that second half, much like us in the Michigan State game. Rutgers had control of that game in the second half,
Yes.
and they just ran out of time.
Yes.
So
I saw that.
Michigan's got some issues still too, and Michigan games at home. Um,
The Iowa game is
whereas
at home too, I believe.
no, well,
Yep.
either way,
It,
is
it
it? It's in Lincoln.
it's in Lincoln.
Okay, well, that's a possibility then. But even so, yes, we got to. I mean, Northwestern is an absolute must win, and then
Yes.
frankly, then Michigan becomes a must win in my opinion, because if we think we're going to beat Wisconsin or Ohio State, that ain't happening. So
Right. Yep.
so I
Yep.
don't
So
know.
yeah. Now like we said, that early Illinois loss that really put a real damper on the season in terms of our hopes of that 6 wins and having the
Oh,
chance
I
to go
agree.
bowling. So now it's like we really need to kind of turn a corner here. And unfortunately, I feel like this Michigan State loss could be one of those losses where Scott starts to lose the team because the defense played their hearts out. And I texted you, like, I feel bad for our defensive players that are out there playing some of their best football, they've played, and yet they're still losing because the other parts of our team are just so inefficient, insufficient. So I hope that Scott's able to kind of hold that together. And like he kind of said, like the team kind of, gets on the guys on the special teams that are making mistakes and that kind of peer pressure and trying to work on things as a team, keeps this whole train running. But it could go the opposite way as well, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Well, so I just look at it now and say, okay, now the shit hits the fan, and this game against Northwestern has to just get their absolute universal and complete focus, and they've got to find a way to win this game. And in fact, I think it would be really really helpful if they won this game in clear fashion, meaning sound offense, sound defense, sound kicking game, and a 14-point victory, right? And if they did that, then they could actually have momentum for the Michigan game, which they would need. I think if you end up in another struggle against Northwestern, you win, but it's a squeaker. I don't know. I mean, you might be excited and that's good and it's positive and we get a third victory, but that doesn't give you what you need to springboard into the Michigan game. You follow me? We need a clear, demonstrated step forward to be the team that people say we could be if we just clean shit up,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. And it's worth noting that this Northwestern team played the Michigan State team we just played in their first game of the season and lost 38-21. And then they lost to Duke 30-23. So they are also 2-2 right now. Well, actually, we're 2-3, but they're 2-2 right now. They just beat Ohio University, my alma mater, 35-6 last week, which is a MAC school. So we're kind of gonna be another test for them. It's like, okay, this team lost to Michigan State like we did, but they were kind of better than Michigan State, and it's at Lincoln. So I agree with you. This is like a must-win game for
It
sure for
is.
Scott.
It absolutely is.
So,
It absolutely is. It's a minimum that we've got to win it. And like I said, if we have any hope of getting to 5 or even 6 wins, and I think your thought on 6 wins would be, I would at this point be giddy with 6 victories. I would.
right.
I would feel good about where we were, and I would say definitively that Scott's earned himself another year if he gets to 6 wins with
Yeah.
this schedule.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's
Yeah.
why 6 wins is the most optimistic possible
Yes. Exactly.
possibility.
Yeah,
Um,
we're not in a good shape
but
with that.
what is your prediction on the score for the Northwestern game?
Okay. I'm going to say that we are going to win this game. Well, yes, we are going to win this game. Um, but I'm gonna say something at the very end. Remind me. Um,
Okay.
so we're going to win the game. I believe we're going to win it by 14 points. Um, and but we are still going to have special teams problems, especially in the punting game, because I believe that uh, Coach from Northwestern, his name's escaping me right at the moment, but you know who I'm talking about. Doggone it. Anyway, he is going to prepare his special teams, and whether it be in the field goal units or his punting unit or something, they're going to expose our lack of preparation on special teams again with some kind of a trick play because he knows we're weak there. He knows we're fragile, and he knows he's probably at a disadvantage offensively and defensively. So he's going to win this game on special teams. That's his plan. Um, so I guarantee you we're going to lose the special teams battle, but I'm hopeful that we can win the other two sides of the other 2/3 of the game enough to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
So the final score 35 21. There's my 14 points.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. I think I'm going to go a little lower scoring than you because I'm going to predict that our defense plays well again, but that the offense will struggle as they have been throughout the season, but that we will win. So I'll go ahead and predict that. I'll go ahead and predict that Northwestern gets 14, and we get, what would that be? I guess 24. We win by 10.
Okay. You know what? I like your score. That's a good, thoughtful score, Alex. My thinking is just that yes, our defense is only going to give up 14 points, but then we're going to give up 7 points on special teams, and that's going to be the difference. Now, here's the kicker in this whole deal. Okay, having been at the game at Michigan State, and I'm pretty sure that the Minnesota coaches aren't going to be checking this podcast out. But I'm going to tell you right now, Adrian is hurt. His throwing shoulder is hurt, and we're going to see that play out over the coming weeks. I think Adrian's passing performance is going to diminish because he has a recurring shoulder problem, which he's had for a couple of years now, but it got aggravated at the beginning of the Michigan State game. I know he went into the locker room and they said it was, probably concussion protocol or some other reason, but I believe it was his shoulder, and I believe he got a shot, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he's not even throwing the football during this week's preparation for the game. Like, he won't start throwing it until Wednesday.
Yep.
Because they're going to try to give him as much rest as possible, and they're trying to keep this quiet. When I think what they should be doing is preparing their backup quarterback to play this week, Smothers, and they should just give Adrian the day off, because not that you're taking Northwestern lightly or anything, but if you did it that way, then at least Northwestern would be surprised when Smothers started. Right? They would not have prepared for a guy that was quite that athletic. I mean, Smothers is faster than Adrian. And and we would have a very run centric quarterback, keeper centric kind of setup, and a lots of quick, fast passes, quick decisions, things like that. And I actually think that could work out really well for us offensively with the wide receivers that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, just low risk, quick, move it down the field, move the chains, and let's get this thing going, right? And give Adrian a week off to try to heal up that shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we're going to be living with this overthrowing 6'9" tight ends,
Right.
and everybody's going to be, what's wrong with Adrian? And then later in the year, it'll finally come out that he got hurt in the Michigan State game, and he's been playing with basically half a shoulder, and we're planning off-season shoulder surgery or some shit like that.
Right. Which
Um,
I don't know if it came to all the way to shoulder surgery, but we have done that in the past where he's been hurt and we've kept playing him because we weren't confident in the backup.
right, I know. And if I'm Scott Frost, way better for you to concede that Adrian needs some time, even if it's not something you can have surgery on. Obviously, that went in this season. And if the doctors say, well, it's not going to get worse, it's just one of those things that every time he gets tackled, he's going to, it's a stinger and it's going to hurt like hell, and then he's going to have to let the pain subside and then go out there and play again, right? But you can only do that so many times. I've played with a stinger, and it's just, it affects your ability to do your job. And I was never a quarterback. I
Right.
can't imagine doing it as a quarterback. So I'm just here to tell you, I believe they're trying to disguise or hide that. And again, Northwestern's coaches, way too smart, way too good. They're going to watch this game. They're going to see Adrian's behavior. They're going to see how he's shaking his shoulder. They're going to see how when he walks, his gait, his arm isn't even moving. I'm sorry, the guy's got a shoulder problem. We need to be honest about it and deal with it. Instead, we're being ostriches and sticking our head in the sand. And that could blow up this whole prediction that you and I just gave if I'm right.
Right.
And I think I am.
Yep. And Smothers did come in for a series when Adrian did have to go to the locker room in the Michigan State game and did
Right.
decently well until the offensive line had two false starts in a row and set the whole series back. But
Correct.
I think we can give him a shot for sure, especially like you
Me
say,
too.
if we adjust the playbook to account for the fact that we know we're going to be starting him, if we plan for it ahead of time versus planning for
Right.
Adrian to play in the game, then he gets
Yeah.
sacked, gets hurt, and now Smothers is
Right.
coming in with the Adrian game plan, and we're in trouble.
Right. And he hasn't been taking snaps with the offensive line, and so the cadence is different. And what happens? False starts. Right. You got a young offensive line. You change quarterbacks. No, 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 no. Bad idea. Go ahead and accept that Adrian's not going to be available. Give Smothers all the snaps all week long. Prepare, prepare, prepare. You don't have to tell us in the public, that Adrian's not going to play, and then make it a game time, announcement when he doesn't walk out and start the game, right? Like, I mean, literally, Adrian's the starter on the PA announces at the beginning, but then Smothers is the guy that runs out there for the first play.
Yep.
And then, like you say, prepare a game plan around what Smothers can do well, and see if that's enough. By tightening up your game, your offensive play calling, guess what might happen? Your execution might go up, right? And you won't be as diverse, but you'll be better at what you do.
Right.
What a
Yep.
concept.
True, but Scott does love his diverse play calling, and
Oh, I know.
it does throw off, some of our guy or the teams we play against for sure. But
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. If Scott had more mature talent, and I will concede, every year he's either not had the wide receivers necessary to execute his offense, not had the offensive line to execute his offense, or not had the quarterback depth that allowed him to execute his offense. I mean, there's always been deficiencies in his personnel structure that have kept him from being able to be everything that he wanted his offense to be. I totally get that. Um,
right.
and that's where his statement is true about, in the Big Ten, you need to get old and stay old. And he's right about that. But we've never been old across the board. You know, we're as old as we've been this year. And again, are we going to stay old? No, we're not. Right? Because next year our defense is going to be very young, and our offensive line will be old. Right? Our offense overall will be old next year because assuming a bunch of people don't transfer and Scott's still our coach and all that, if we had stability, then and everybody came back, we'd have a ton of returning starters on offense. Mm-hmm. So our offense would get old, but then our defense is going to be young.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well, that's last thing I'll say is that's just one of those things we've talked about in the past where sometimes you need to kind of compromise and maybe give up on the style of offense you really would like to run and instead adapt your offense to what you have available to you, you know, in terms of your players and everything. Because that's something that other coaches at smaller schools have done and to great success, you know, and it's frustrating. We haven't had a coach like that in a long time, it feels like.
You're right. Wow.
Because you'll remember Pelini's stubbornness too on defense.
Well, you know, yeah. If we had more time, which we don't, I would go into the whole Pelini thing and where I think the China doll syndrome originates from him and went all the way through the Mike Riley era and is still with us to this day.
Yeah.
Because we've never been able to get back to mental toughness since Pelini ripped the throat and the heart out of Nebraska football, including its fans.
Yep. So. I guess so. All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I hope you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast. If you did, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing from the fans. Like to read those out on the air. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for joining me today for this podcast, Dad. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.